Have you ever wondered what are the main document types that I need as a startup fashion brand? Well, I know 4 years ago, I wish that I did. There's so many headaches, so many miscommunications with factories, so many times that I looked stupid not knowing what a commercial invoice was, what a service level agreement was, what an NDA was, because I just didn't have the experience nor the knowledge. Well, on today's episode, I'll be giving you guys the core documents that every startup brand, and honestly, even if you're already established and you're making a killing, you should still need these documents. Double check your HR if you don't have them. But on this episode, we'll be looking at the core documents you need as a startup brand. As a reference point, I'm going to be looking at the Fittdesign company document starter kit at www.fittdesign.com, but you don't need this if you don't want it. It's just a handy way that has everything in one. So all the core documents that we're going to need are going to be first, our bill of materials. What is a bill of materials? Every single garment that you create is constructed from a series of different parts. You have a standard t-shirt, but that standard t-shirt has the fabric that is used. It has the different prints that are on it. It may have a care label. It may have a hang tag attachment. It may have specific types of threads that are used. Also, we have to account for the labor cost. What a bill of materials allows you to do is to break down your costs so that you know exactly what your cost of goods sold are. That way you can make an educated decision on how much you can price a garment. That way, every single time you're making a sale, you're actually making a profit and you're moving your business forward. So every standard bill of materials, and we include it in both a standard PDF format and a pages or a numbers format so that you can go in and edit these cells. Also, you can use this on sheets, you can use this on Excel, whatever standard Excel format you use. I'm going to open up the PDF file here. This one should include your company logo, your company name. So this is an internal company document. You should have your website here. You should have your phone number, your email. Basically, any official document that you send off as part of your company should have your company letterhead on it. Then you want to indicate your SKU name. We've gone into separate episodes on how to standardize your SKUs, but we pretty much include the first 3 letters of the brand name. We include the gender. We include the type of product. So this is a short sleeve. We include the variant of it. So this is a red colorway of that short sleeve, and then the season it's launching. We also include the size range because sometimes your size range has an effect on the finished cost of goods sold. Sometimes the larger sizes will accrue more fabric because they're just using more fabric, so they'll cost much more. And then we have the date created and perhaps the date modified if you have any additional information in the future. If you can see here, I have my rows broken down with fabric first. I'll include the item name. This is a performance anti-odor shirt fabric. I'll include the fiber content or the description, which is 85 polyester, 15% poly bamboo. And then I'll include the article number. This is basically the manufacturer code. I'll include the color of the actual fabric that I'm using. Here it's a caviar black. And then I'll include the supplier name here. And then I'll look at the size or the weight of the width. So if this is a fabric, it's going to come in a variety of different weights and different widths. So I'll include that here. This is a 60-inch roll at a 162 gram per square meter weight measurement. Then we look at the unit measurement, which is yards in here, and then the usage. This means that every single t-shirt is going to take up 1.1 yards of that 60-inch width roll. And if we look at the unit price of this fabric, it's $3.2 per yard, and that's a total cost of $3.52 in terms of fabric cost for this specific t-shirt. Then if I look at the different logos that are on this, let's just say this garment is decked out with different logos. I have a silicone logo, I have 2 heat transfer prints, I have a brand or a size print on the back, I have a woven label. All of these costs add up. I include all this information on here, and then you can see all these trims are on there. If I had zippers, if I had pullers, if I had other types of accessories, I would also include them in this section. Since this is a standard t-shirt, I don't have any of that. Then we'll look at the packaging. For the packaging, since each and every single product that is going to leave your warehouse to your customer is going to include a full package set, you should include it into the cost of goods sold. If you don't put it in as a direct cost, you're going to be missing out on a ton of variable costs. So here we look at your frosted Ziploc product sleeve, the poly mailer, the SKU sticker, the tissue paper, the hang tag. All of these things are accounted into our bill of materials. And lastly, we have our labor cost, which we can estimate it's around $4 per shirt, and that accounts to a total of $8.795 for the total manufacturing cost, and then $9.352 for the total actual cost of goods sold. What is the difference between manufacturing cost and the cost per one unit? Well, total manufacturing cost includes the labor cost, plus the trims, plus the fabric. It's basically everything that goes into the product, and then the total cost of goods sold also includes the packaging, which may be added by a different supplier, or you may have sourced it yourself, or it may have been added by the same supplier. But chances are, if you're creating a bill of materials, you're having more control over sourcing the different components. You can still use this if you're actually sourcing directly with the manufacturer, although you might not have as many lines as this. That's the bill of materials. Next up, we have our client and company contract. What this is a services agreement that outlines a couple of core things between you and any company that you choose to work with. So if you're a brand and you choose to work with a design agency to help you design, develop, and produce your clothing, well, this could be a great way of outlining the scope of work and other core obligations that you and your design team have to follow. This one has a scope of work. It has a bunch of other stipulations such as the pricing. So what is the agreed upon pricing and what are the payment terms? Is it a deposit term? Is it full upfront? Is it deposit plus a net payment? This you can outline on here. What are the delivery terms? How should the items be packaged? When should they be delivered? Is there any sort of penalties on late delivery? Acceptance. This also means once you have received your digital services or your products from said supplier, what are the acceptance terms? Do you have the ability to challenge if there's an issue? How long do you have to actually refute delivery of this so that you can actively find a solution with the person you're working with? If you want to terminate the contract for any reason, either one of the parties wishes to back out of the agreement, what are the terms of this? Lastly, if there needs to be any modifications, waivers, or amendments to the core contract, what are those stipulations? And also, what are your rules over subcontracting assignment? If you're working with a design agency, you don't want them subcontracting out your brand to another third-party entity that may not follow the same rigorous guidelines that the agency that you're working with is actually following. This is all up to you, and you can amend this as needed, but this is a pretty clear and concise design agreement. Next up, we have our invoices. Invoices are essential because they create the financial lifeline of the company. In our invoice, this basically means, let's just say you are sending or you're selling your products to a retailer or you're selling them to a department store. You create an invoice to that retail store or the department store in order to buy from you. In here, you have the invoice number, you have your invoice date, you have, of course, your company details. Any official document that leaves your company should have your core company details. Who are you billing to and who are you shipping to? What is a good example of this? For example, if you're working with Harvey Nichols Department Store, you may be billing to Harvey Nichols Department Store HQ, which is in one country or in one state, and you may be shipping to a specific warehouse or a specific outlet. That's why those two terms are there. If they're the same, if the person you're billing to and you're shipping to, just copy paste the same information. Delivery date. What is the agreed upon delivery date? What shipping method are you using? Who is the contact person that you're communicating with for the requested buy? That's very important. And what is the estimated production time or delivery time? Now we look at what are the items. So for each of the items that you're selling, you have the item name, you have the reference picture, which is copy paste. You have the description of the product. Here I put a relaxed fit men's set and sleep performance tee. The colorway requested. So if you have the same product in different colorways, you would have duplicates of those rows in those different colors. You have the material specification. The sizing split is essential. What sizes are you going to be receiving or are you going to be selling to the customer? Size 50, size XS is a size 50, small is a size 50. Of course, you can adjust as needed. And we've actually set up this file so that these here add up to the quantity per colorway. So if you adjust any of these, you'll increase the quantity per colorway. Then what is the price per unit? What is the packing amount? And then all of these are set up numerically so that as soon as you adjust the price per unit, everything on here automatically adjusts. If you make an adjustment on the sizes that you ordered, the per colorway adjusts, and then the total amount adjusts, and then the subtotal adjusts, and the tax amount adjusts. Everything is 100% linked. Any special remarks on there you need to add. If you have any special payment terms, is it net 50, net 60, whatever it is, you have to outline on here. That's the commercial invoice. Next up, you have your purchase order. Your purchase order is essential as well. If you're a brand working with a factory, a purchase order is fundamental because you need to have extreme clarity over what items you're purchasing, what sizes you're purchasing, what prices you've agreed on, what are the packing ways you've agreed on. The last thing that you want with any factory is for you to pay them money and then for them to amend your order down the line saying, oh, we need to increase this price because of XYZ, or we have adjusted the color, or we have adjusted the size split. If you have a purchase order, you're setting in stone what the final purchase is, and you're making it clear for both parties involved. The setup of a purchase order is the same as your commercial invoice, but with small adjustments. You have your company information, your PO number, your PO date, purchase order, then you have the vendor and the ship to. The vendor is the factory you're buying from, and where you're shipping to is essentially where the garments are going to be arriving. Again, this could work if you're shipping them directly to your address, or if you're shipping them to a third-party warehouse address. If you're a larger brand, you may have other warehouses that you're working with, and that's the shipment place that you're going to be outlining on here. Delivery date, shipping method, and requested by, those are all essential. And then when we see the purchase order form, it's pretty much the same as the commercial invoice, with the item name, the reference picture, the description, the color, the material, the sizing split, the price per unit, packing, total amount, grand total, and then you can also input, if you have specific stipulations with your factory on specific payment terms, what those are. Next up, we're going to be going down. We have our quality control document. This is beyond essential for any brand. When you're working with a factory, you need to ensure quality in production. So whenever you're receiving either your prototype samples, your pre-production samples, or your shipment samples, you should have a clear and concise way of outlining, does this garment meet our quality control standards? If you have the luxury of being on the production line or hiring a third-party quality control officer, you can also use this as well. You have your company information on here. You have the batch sample information, so perhaps you attach an image of the specific batch of samples that you're using, product description, your client, supplier, manufacturer, PO number, because you want to attach this quality control checklist to a specific order that you've made. That way, you know that this quality control is attached to that order. Your item number, so how much quantity, and then your order quantity, inspection type, and sampling standard. From here, you can look at your inspection criteria sheet and go into the checklist. Does it have any broken, cracked, missing, or wrong color accessories? Here, you can outline minor, major, critical. So if you have something that is considered to be a minor defect, then you can put that in there, or NA just means that it passes. Same is true for the measurement checks. You can outline what are the core measurement points that you're adding. If you need to add new rows, just right click, add row below, and then you can also add that as well and go through your sizes. Your quality conformity, you have that as well, and you have your marking, labeling, and packaging. This is very important because you may have specific packing methodologies for your garments. If your factory does not follow through that could cause major issues for you on fulfillment and delivery. Imagine receiving all of your garments without hang tags attached that you need to attach yourself, and you've ordered thousands of pieces. So this is a great way for you to indicate to the factory how important that is. And then you have your on-site testing if you have the luxury of hiring a third-party vendor or a third-party quality control officer. Fatigue testing for specific items. You can of course add more tests if you need to, but the major things that you want to test for are buttons, snaps, zippers that are intended for specific cycles, or if you have anything that needs to be wash tested or stretch tested or shrink tested, you also can put that in this section. Buttonholes, this is especially important if you have any garments with open buttonholes that need to be stitched down and secured. Then you have your signatures and an overall inspection conclusion and the reasons for that. Next up, we have our non-disclosure agreement. Your non-disclosure agreement is a fundamental part of any working relationship that you have with a supplier, a vendor, or a manufacturing partner that you're working with. It indicates that any shared IP that you share with them is the property of you and you alone, and that it should be protected and not shared with any entity that does not have any purpose working on the project. So you sign this to make sure that there's a unilateral agreement between both parties. All ownership or all intellectual property is the sole ownership of your company and should not be shared without any authorization from the manufacturer's side. Look at the purpose of this agreement. You can look at it for employment, contract work, such as for productions, or you can look at it as a business partnership or any specific scenario that you want. For you, if you're working with a manufacturer, you could be looking at it as a contract work, confidential agreement, or confidential information. You can put in the specific stipulations of what is considered to be confidential. Is it just your brand assets? Is it the designs? Is it specific communication that you have with your manufacturer? What do you need to be stipulated underneath this as confidential information? So that way, if there's any issues, you can call them out on it, and you can also pursue legal action to protect yourself if need be. Lastly, you can look at the obligations. What happens or how are both parties obliged to follow through with this contract in the event that they do sign it. And what is the time period? You always need to have the time period. You cannot have an NDA be signed indefinitely. Whether it's for 1 year, 2 years, make sure that it is a time frame that makes the most amount of sense for you and your partner that you're working with. Integration, if any other proposals, agreements, or representations need to be superseded in order to implement this agreement. What does this mean? This means that if you had another NDA that's signed with the factory that has other stipulations, how do those two agreements intersect each other? Which one supersedes the other? Do they complement each other? If they contradict each other, which one is going to be taken as the correct one? This is what that stipulation is for. Severability, what does it mean if a court finds that any provision of this agreement is invalid or unenforceable, the remainder of this agreement shall be interpreted to be as the intent of the parties. So this is also very, very important. Lastly, what is enforcement and where or what governing laws does this NDA follow? All of these things are super important. Next up, we have our final, which is our SOP. And then we have our manufacturing contract. Our SOP is our standard operating procedures. This is a pretty interesting document because it outlines to any vendor, any manufacturer, any third-party entity that you're working with, what are the core working ways that your company works on. That way they can understand your vision, they can understand what your customer needs, they can understand the underlying purpose of your company. So here, typically, it will outline a couple things. Your vision. So you could say, our vision is to create sustainable and innovative fashion designs that empower individuals to express their unique style while minimizing the impact on the environment. So what this shows manufacturers that you focus on sustainability in all areas of your business, through packaging, through fabric selection, through even the way that they treat their employees. They'll know that if they don't uphold your standards, you are not, or they are not matching your vision, and that perhaps they are not the best option there. What are the skills that you need or that you employ into your business? That way they understand the unique selling points of your business, the customer needs that you have. All of those things are very important. Your employees, how do you, or what types of employees do you employ? Of skills or talents do you bring to the mix? That way they can also understand the working structure of the business. What are the goals of the company? What is the design process? So if you're a company that is highly design focused, what is the step-by-step design process that you follow in order to achieve the finished product? Perhaps as a manufacturer or as a fabric supplier, they can integrate into that process to help you uplift or to improve the ways in which you work. You can take them through all the stages step by step. What are the quality control methods that you go by, and what are the quality control things that they need to abide by? Documentation, also what documentation can you provide in your working relationship? If you're a company that creates tech packs, show them your tech packs. If you're a company that issues commercial invoices, purchase orders, and you have official company documentation that they need to be on the same page as, this is a great time to do it. Then you can look at your collaboration, communication. How do you intend to collaborate and to communicate with them? And then how often, if so, do you need to meet with them? On which platforms do you need to meet? Production handover, references, revision history, approvals, so on and so forth. That is your standard operating procedure. And last but definitely not least is your manufacturing agreement contract. A manufacturing agreement contract is an essential part of going into business with a factory. Think of it this way. If you do not make your goals clear with a manufacturer, you're going to open yourself up to potential hazards where things have not been made crystal clear. This contract outlines the purchase of the contract, outlines what you're buying in the manufacturing goods section. You should also input a screenshot of the purchase order. That way you can put into the contract that they're going to sign specifically the purchase order that both parties have agreed to with all of the standards that you've set. What are the product standards? What happens if the products are or suffer a total loss in shipment or in packaging? Who takes care of that? Who is burdened or who is responsible for replacing them? What is the payment methods? Is it 30% before work and then 70% upon issuing of the purchasing or the packing slips or the packaging list? These things should be outlined on here. If you have net payment terms where they'll ship and then you can actively pay within a certain amount of time, you should also outline it on there and get them to sign to it. What is the delivery and production schedule? When it comes to delivery and production schedule, there's a couple things that I like to outline. First, when do we want to receive specific milestones? If I make my payment today, when can I expect to receive my pre-production sample? Upon which, if I confirm my pre-production sample, when can I expect to receive my shipping sample? Upon which, once I confirm my shipping sample, how long before I receive my packing list? And then once I receive my packing list, by which date can I guarantee that I'm receiving my garments in my warehouse? These milestones ensure that you have clarity over your delivery dates. That way, if you're dealing with third-party vendors that you're dealing with, well, you can make sure that you're hitting your schedule. And then in the event that you don't meet those standards or your suppliers don't meet those standards, what are the penalties that they will incur? Specific payments do they need to make for every specific week that their shipment is delayed. For example, here you could say you have X amount of time to deliver the garments. For every week that you are delayed, you pay 3% of the total order value. And then if this goes on for a specific amount of time, you will pay an additional 8% penalty on that order value. So you can lay out the penalties on here, make it crystal clear. What are your policies on defective goods? Outline the specific ways that your factories need to compensate you for defective goods. What are the measurements or what are the standards by which you assess defective goods? This is what you put on here, and you could put in specifically a list of factory made defects, unfinished loose threads and finishings, misaligned printing. Of course, get them to agree to this. This is just a general list. It doesn't mean that this is the definitive list or even an approved list. And then lastly, the acceptance of the terms that both parties agree to. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. That was a long overview of our company document starter kit. If you don't have your own starter kit, look at this as a skeleton, but I highly recommend that you check out our company document starter kit. It's located at www.fittdesign.com. You can find it on here, digital downloads, go into the guide section, and it's on here for immediate purchase and download. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Fittdesign TV. Until next week's episode, stay awesome.